Morning, folks. Well, it's just 2 weeks until Christmas. So this morning, I wanted to share an idea that's not mine originally, but it's something that I came up with that might help some of you who are trying to figure out how to do a project that involves cutting out a shape. It was a few weeks ago that our daughter Sarah, she came to me and she's like, "Dad, could you cut out a round circle out of plywood for me?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I guess I can. You know, it's not going to be a perfect circle." All I could think of at the time was I'm just going to take the saber saw and make a round circle and cut it out the best I can freehand with a saber saw. Well, and then I went to the home building supply store and I saw these ready-made laminated pieces of pine. They're probably 3/4, maybe even an inch thick, with a radius edge on it, already cut out, 18-inch diameter circle. So I just went ahead and bought her one of those, $8-9 or something. And it was thicker than it needed to be and such, but and I thought, well, that's a perfect circle. Well, then in my 4 a.m. planning sessions where I sit and I can't get back to sleep, I start thinking there's got to be a way to use a bandsaw, make some kind of a jig for that. But I was not quite sure how to do it. So I did what many of us do now, is I went on YouTube. Now, YouTube is such a resource. You know, there's so much negative stuff going on now about our country and our divisiveness and the urban versus rural and blah, blah, blah. But what gives me hope is people, good people who are out sharing ideas. The only thing in it for them is that they pass on a really cool idea to somebody else, and it helps other people make life easier and better. I look at the whole homesteading and regenerative farming and people trying to raise food in a conscientious manner and trying to build soil and do all these good things, and all the tons of YouTube videos out there on how to do that. The only thing they're getting out of it is knowing that they are helping us come together. So, it kind of makes you wonder, this politicians shouldn't sit around and watch some YouTube videos on how to do things together rather than tear us all apart. But anyways, good old YouTube, several people actually, I watched several, had different ideas on how to use a bandsaw to cut out a circle. Like this. So this is just 1/2-inch plywood, a piece of scrap 1/2-inch plywood I had left over from my sailboat project last summer. And I used someone else's idea to come up with my version of a jig on my bandsaw to cut out perfect circles. And Sarah uses these to make these really cool signs and puts the lettering on them and stuff. And I know a lot of people are doing that kind of stuff. So rather than jabber on more and more here, I'm going to take you out into the workshop and show you what I made to cut out a perfect circle. It's only 22 degrees outside, and it's not much warmer in here in the workshop. I don't have any heat in here, so I won't keep you in here too long. It's also something that was on my fall to-do list, but it never got off the list, cleaning the workshop. Anyways, I'm going to take you on a little close-up tour here of what I did to make this jig to cut my circles. I saw on YouTube videos that people put out that they built a platform on top of the table. So I was thinking I'd have to come out with some kind of extension off the table. Well, this makes so much more sense. So this is just a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. And I cut this so the back of the plywood is flush with the back of the table on the bandsaw. And then I extended it out 5 inches past the front of the table. So this piece here is 19 inches and the width just is 16.5. And that's 16.5 because probably that's just the size of the piece of the wood when I got it. So what I did then is I measured from the back of the table to the inside edge of the miter gauge here of the slot. And then I drew that line on the bottom of this piece of plywood, that distance, which ended up being something like, I don't remember what it was, 11 3/8 of an inch. It's going to be different for each table. So then what I did is I measured up and I cut a piece of 1/4 inch plywood that's the width of that slot, which is 5/8 of an inch. So I just cut it, slightly less so that it would slide freely in there. And then I just wood glued it and used brads, and I just attached that to the bottom of the board. So that way it'll slide in that slot. So then I just turned the table saw on, and first of all I drew a line down the center of this board from front to back that would divide it in half. And so then I put my guide in the slot and I turned the bandsaw on and I just cut up until I hit that center line, and then I shut the saw off, and then underneath I marked up against the edge of the table, and then I glued another stop, just another piece of scrap plywood. I glued that stop on there so that when this board is slid across the face of the table, it'll never go further than that. And then I'll zoom in a little closer here and show you what I did here. So then I measured back from the blade. I measured back 5 inches, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which would give me a diameter. This would give me a circle, a 10-inch circle, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So every inch I drilled a 1/8 inch hole, drilled it down about a half inch, and not so far, of course, that it goes all the way through. And then I just cut a little peg. It's kind of like playing cribbage, 15-2, 15-4. Anyways, this little peg is just one of the 3/16 aluminum rivets. It's just the shaft of a rivet. Got plenty of them laying around. When you use a rivet, this is just leftover. So I just cut a little post, just out of that scrap shaft, and that's an 1/8 inch diameter. So a 3/16 rivet gives you an 1/8 inch diameter post. So I cut that, or I drilled that. I used my drill that has a level built into it for doing plumb drills. So you can drill that hole, that 1/8 inch hole, as straight as possible. And then maybe put a piece of tape on that drill bit so you don't drill it too deep. So all of your holes are drilled to the same depth. And then what we'll do is drill another hole in our piece of wood that's going to be cut. So this is just a scrap piece of plywood, 1/2 inch plywood that I happen to have laying around. So I'm going to cut, today I'm going to cut a 16 inch circle. So I just used the table saw and I cut a square just over 16 and a quarter by 16 and a quarter, and then just used a straight edge going from corner to corner to give myself the center of the, or approximately the center. And then what I'm going to do is just drill a hole, make sure I don't drill all the way through the plywood, a hole that'll hold that pin. So we're going to drill that pilot hole, that hole in the center of our board to be cut into a circle. So if you don't have a drill that has a level built into it for making plumb straight holes, or if you don't quite trust something like that and you don't have a big massive drill press, what you can do if you do have a drill press is just take a block of wood, this is about an inch and a half thick, and just drill a nice straight 1/8 inch hole through that block of wood, and then you can just use a cordless drill and then just drill a shallow pilot hole, and then put your bit, ooh, it's cold, put your bit through that block of wood, and then you can actually then set the depth. So it won't drill any deeper than, in this case, than about, 3/8 of an inch or so. So then just push the bit through, get it in that pilot hole, and then put the block of wood on top, and then make sure it's forward, and then you get a reasonably straight hole. I mean, it's not terribly fussy, but it helps to have a straight hole, both on the piece of wood that you're cutting and on the holes that have the pins in them on your jig on the saw. So lining up the hole with the pin, it just takes a little trial and error, but I put the pin in the jig in the 16-inch hole, and then just take your piece of wood and then just kind of eyeball it the best you can, and there it goes, right in there. Okay, so now we're just going to fire this thing up. It's going to make some racket. I suppose they don't run so good when it's below freezing. And turn the saw on, and then we'll just cut until we hit that stop. Now I'll go ahead and shut the saw off to be safe here, and then I'm going to take a spring clamp and I'll just clamp the back of my piece of 3/4 inch plywood to the back of the table, just so that it's not going to wobble around. So then all we have to do now is just turn the saw back on and slowly turn it, and you can see why we cut our piece of wood 16 1/4 inches, because I didn't get that hole, I'm sure, exactly centered on that board, and then that way we're assured we don't have any flat spots. So, there we have it. Perfect circle. Not perfect, of course. I guess you call it a good enough circle. Feels much better in here. So, I now have a 14-inch diameter one that I showed you earlier that I had cut out before. And now the one we just cut out, a 16-inch diameter circle that can be cut from anything from 1/4 inch plywood to 3/4 inch, I imagine, or even thicker, I suppose, if you had a need for it and wanted to make like bar stools or something, seats. But I just wanted to share that because I just made that with scrap lumber, just scrap wood left over from the sailboat project. But the other message, besides wanting to share an idea that I got from others, is just this whole idea of us sharing ideas and learning to grow together by sharing ideas. And forget about the government. I think we need to work together, do it ourselves. Just keep sharing these ideas. One of the coolest things I can't imagine. You imagine 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where you could just go on a channel and learn just about anything imaginable. It's really amazing. So, I know people are going to say, just get to the point, stop jabbering, and just show us how to do it. But I just wanted to share my thoughts too, especially this time of year and this year. Let's grow together.